Okay, so chloroquine has been in the news recently as the President of America, Donald Trump, and the CEO of Tesla, Elon Musk, began recommending the use of this anti-malaria drug to treat COVID-19. Now, these people may not be the most reliable sources for scientific information. I mean, at least Elon is a scientist, but I think he should stay in his lane and focus on rockets and cars on rockets, or whatever he's up to. What caught my attention is the fact that scientists all over the world in the field of medicine and virology have been experimenting with this drug as an actual treatment. And the World Health Organization announced a large global trial called Solidarity, where labs can contribute and collaborate their research together. They are focusing on what they think are the four most promising therapies, and chloroquine is one of them. Let me just read this excerpt from a AAAS Science article. The list of drugs to test first was put together for the WHO by a panel of scientists who have been assessing the evidence for candidate therapies since January. The group selected drugs that had the highest likelihood of working, had the most safety data from previous use, and are likely to be available in supplies sufficient to treat substantial numbers of patients if the trial shows they work. Okay, just a little history lesson before we do a deep dive into the biochemistry. Chloroquine was discovered in 1934 by an Italian scientist, Hans Andersag, while working for the company Bayer AG, and was mass-produced under the brand name Risokin. Although, this will differ depending on which country you're in and which company you get it from. Thankfully, generic forms are now available as well, putting an end to those confusing names.
I am what I am. I am my own special creation.
Okay, so that was chloroquine, but what about hydroxychloroquine? You may have heard of that as well. Hydroxychloroquine is a less toxic derivative developed during the Second World War. It was produced as an alternative to alleviate some of the more than unpleasant side effects that were experienced from chloroquine. But is it the same compound? No, check it. It has the same structure as chloroquine, except for the addition of a hydroxyl group near the tertiary amine. Hold up, let me summon my 3D model. Have a better look. This hydroxyl group is very polar, like, the special kind of polar that can form hydrogen bonds, meaning it really loves water molecules. Thus, it is more water-soluble than chloroquine, making it easier for the body to excrete. You see, the liver functions to take up toxic substances and convert them into less harmful substances. These substances are processed, stored, altered, and detoxified, then passed back into the blood or released into the bowel to be excreted through the urine or bile, respectively. This process is separated into two phases. In phase 1, the liver uses enzymes to oxidize the toxins, making them more water-soluble. Although, sometimes the end product of phase 1 detoxification in the liver is more dangerous than the compound being detoxified. So, to complete the detoxification, the liver performs a second phase, called conjugation. In this phase, oxidized toxins are combined with sulfur, specific amino acids, or organic compounds, and then excreted in bile so they land in your toilet rather than a vital organ. Many drugs are fat-soluble to begin with, and are therefore difficult or impossible to eliminate without the liver's help. Chloroquine fits into this category, as it is lipophilic and tends to sequester in body fat. After its ingestion and absorption, it requires assistance from plasma proteins for transportation through the circulatory system. Then, the amount that makes it past the liver is deposited in tissues all over the body, and really just chills there until the body decides to metabolize its fat stores. In contrast, Hydroxychloroquine, as you know, is more hydrophilic. I guess you could say it has already taken some oxidative damage, meaning it can be more easily excreted from the blood into the urine. But this is not the only thing that contributes to toxicity. An important metric to understand here is volume of distribution. Imagine you take a certain drug dosage and it is distributed throughout your body. But where does it go? And how much of it goes to those areas? If you consider your body, it is fairly complex, with a lot of different areas or compartments to which the drug can localize. To simplify this, we can divide the body into two compartments. The central compartment, consisting of the blood where the drug is immediately distributed, and the peripheral compartment, consisting of tissues and organs where the drug is distributed more slowly. Now, if we take a blood sample after it has been distributed throughout the body and determine its concentration, we can divide the amount of drug initially taken by this concentration to find the volume of distribution. This tells us the volume of fluid that would be required to contain the amount of drug present in the body at the same concentration that is measured in the blood. For example, here are the typical liquid volumes for a 70-kilo man. So in this case, if the volume of distribution is 11 liters, then half of the drug is distributed in the central compartment, and the other half is distributed in the peripheral compartment. But anything higher than that means that more of the drug is in the peripheral compartment. Here are some actual volumes of distribution calculated by scientists. And as you can see, hydroxychloroquine has significantly lower values. That being said, these volumes of distribution are still huge when compared to other drugs. So don't go and think it's safe to take loads of hydroxychloroquine just because its volume of distribution is lower than chloroquine. Another important metric here is the half-life, which is the time it takes for the blood plasma concentration of a substance to halve when circulating in the blood of an organism. A smaller half-life reduces the risk of accumulation in bodily tissues, thus reduces the risk of adverse side effects and overdose. Basically, the higher the number is, the longer it stays in the body.
Warning, blood toxin levels detected.
An analogy of this would be the half-life series. The higher the number, the longer it takes to release. Okay, here's the actual scientific data, and it's kind of mixed. Now, you would expect that based on the volume of distribution, chloroquine would have a higher half-life as well, but you have to consider that the blood and plasma concentrations of hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine can vary in individual patients and between patients. Also, different analytical methods can be applied to determine these concentrations, which could vary the results. So, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, hydroxychloroquine is less toxic than chloroquine based on the basic biochemistry and volume of distribution, but for some reason the half-life does not always correlate, and they are both very toxic in large amounts due to their accumulation. You know the stuff that makes tonic water taste a little bitter and glow under ultraviolet light? Well, it's called quinine, and it's what the molecular structures of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine are based upon. They belong to a class of drugs known as 4-aminoquinolines, which have an amino group at the fourth position of the quinoline moiety. Quinine is found in cinchona tree bark, and it has been used to treat malaria for centuries, all the way back to the 1600s in fact. Nowadays, the amount of quinine in tonic is much lower, and drinking it will not protect you against malaria or any type of virus for that matter. After the discovery of the synthetic pathways to produce chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, they quickly replaced quinine as the primary treatment to protect against the various plasmodium species that cause malaria. So that's like a lot of years now where humans have been using 4-aminoquinolines. Because of this, and the fact that it has been extensively used in mass drug administrations, plasmodium species have started to develop widespread resistance to it. And by looking at this map, resistant plasmodiums exist pretty much everywhere where you can get malaria, except for these few areas colored in orange. And that just shows how careful we really have to be about our use of drugs in this world. Medical experts now recommend checking if chloroquine is still effective in the region prior to using it. In areas where resistance is present, other antimalarials, such as mefloquine and atovaquone, may be used instead. Over the years, chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine were introduced serendipitously for the treatment of various autoimmune and inflammatory diseases due to its immunomodulatory properties. Neither chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine underwent conventional drug development. It's one of those accidental scientific discoveries, like penicillin. Someone using it as a prophylactic against malaria was probably like, oh hey, every time I visit a tropical region, the pain and swelling in my joints decreases. Except for that time when my pharmacist swapped my chloroquine for Viagra. Huh. I'll look into that. This begs the question of whether drugs with undeniable healing effects really need years of testing. And this may be the type of thinking that is happening with the recent news of a French study that tested the antibiotic azithromycin with hydroxychloroquine to treat the late stages of COVID-19. It's a polarizing topic and has some skeptics saying the study is not scientific, which they are totally correct. It definitely was not scientific at all. Only 36 people were involved, and it was not a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, which is the gold standard of clinical science. They had some promising results, and were pretty much like, we need to tell the medical community about our discovery. No time for questions. We have a pandemic on our hands. This would be a hypothesis-generating observation. It is not 100% conclusive. There could be some benefit, but we don't know for sure. We definitely need to study it more, with a well-designed clinical trial to look into it further, which is exactly what the World Health Organization is doing with Solidarity. So why did the Trump administration approve the drug? Well, they didn't. Technically, chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine are officially approved by the FDA for medical use, but this was only for malaria and inflammatory diseases. They are not FDA approved for the treatment of COVID-19. They issued an emergency use authorization, which allows use of both drugs for patients already in the hospital for the coronavirus. Because of this enthusiasm, chaos ensued. It is extremely dangerous for people to blindly medicate themselves. This is because the therapeutic and lethal doses are very close to each other. A Wuhan Institute of Virology study found that taking just twice the daily recommended dose, which is around 1 gram, is enough to kill an adult. Another issue this hysteria has caused is widespread shortages and instances of hoarding. So this is a public announcement for everybody. Please consider the people who use this drug daily as a proven medication. It would put them at more risk of serious COVID-19 symptoms from an out-of-control immune system or hospitalization due to malaria without it. Think of those in need and be safe. Thank you.